Bad Big Ten is the first and most prominent theme and narrative for week one as we approach Saturday. Welcome into the Voice of College Football on a Friday night post-game. We are live with all of you to talk college football and what's going on first and foremost Friday night. And of course, we will continue to talk Saturday with the incredible triple header on ABC on tap with Clemson, Georgia at noon, Miami, Florida at 3:30. And then the game that I would like to see more than any, Notre Dame and Texas A&M. But let's talk about what's going on tonight. And before we do that, we got our returns from Amazon from last month. Man, we are going to start promoting Amazon all the time. That's all we're going to do. I'm going to do like shows, and I'm going to take a lead from ESPN is what I'm going to do. Where I saw a study a couple years ago that showed that back in the day, 80s, 90s, that in a typical sports center, they would promote about 3 minutes out of 60. Out of every hour, they would promote for 3 minutes, which we don't do. We don't promote for 3 minutes. But now, out of 60 minutes, ESPN promotes like 26 minutes out of every 60 minutes, which is incredible. Promotes their own shows, promotes something. So we'll have to do that. The Amazon link's in the description section of all the videos. When you shop on Amazon, please use the link that we provide. It is exactly the same shopping experience to you. Doesn't cost you a penny, and it's the one way you can contribute here, the Voice of College Football. The other way you can do that, that's not coming out of your pocket, though, when you shop on Amazon. That's the only way that you can do it without spending a penny, and you can help us grow the channel. How about that? Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App are the most effective ways in terms of donations. And, of course, we've got the Super Chat. But, again, we emphasize, for good reason, Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App, and we thank those people that do that from time to time. It's not like a regular thing, but from time to time, I will open up a Venmo and wow, hey, somebody gave me $5. Very nice. Thank you so much for that. You know who you are. All right. The Big Ten. They dropped one last night. Minnesota, sloppy on offense, ineffective on offense, non-existent in the passing game, and North Carolina wins at the gun on the road at Minnesota in a tight ball game, ugly ball game. But for the second straight year, Minnesota, a decision on a Thursday night to open the season with a field goal on the last play of the game. This one goes against them, and they lose to North Carolina. So ACC 1, Big Ten 0. Then tonight, just saw Western Michigan pull off a fake field goal. The kicker ran forever, and he got it first and goal, and then Western Michigan takes it in from there. The Broncos lead Wisconsin as we are now into the fourth quarter in Madison. How about that? Western Michigan 14, Wisconsin 13 as of just a couple seconds ago. And again, this game's already in the fourth quarter, and Wisconsin's down at home as a 3-touchdown plus favorite. Speaking of which, you get some freebies this weekend on the predictions. You'll have mine for free, and then you will have the selections from Steve Dace and from Matt Zemek. You saw the 12 packs. They're posted on the page. We just posted those about an hour ago, so check out Matt and Steve's predictions. And we got Wisconsin in trouble. Michigan State was in trouble earlier tonight. So the mid-tier to the lower portion of the Big Ten not performing well. Michigan State taken to the wire by FAU and Cam Fancher at quarterback. And Aiden Childs looked marginal. The passing attack was iffy for Michigan State. They did not look like necessarily the better team on the field tonight against FAU. They were at home. They win 16-10. And FAU had a couple drives in the fourth quarter in which they didn't threaten significantly, but they would cross midfield. They would put something together, and then it would bog down from there. And they missed a wide open receiver with about 3 minutes left in the game that might have taken it to the house. And again, back to the Wisconsin effort, this is about Tyler Van Dyke, of course. That's the big acquisition of the Badgers this season. And he's put the ball in harm's way. He's shown off his arm a few times. He made a tremendous cross field throw from the right hash to the left sideline to show off his arm because the guy can sling it. However, he almost got picked off in the red zone, and that turned into a field goal for the Badgers. And the Wisconsin offense, actually, despite not scoring much in the first half, they had a 10-7 lead. They scored their first two drives, but there was still only like 1 minute left in the first half. They only got their hands on the ball twice, and they looked good. They drove for a touchdown. They drove for what should have been a touchdown. They settled for the field goal. So it looked bad from a scoring standpoint that they only had 10 points at halftime, but their first two drives score. But Western Michigan very effective in killing the time in the first half. So again, the Big Ten not looking rather good here in some less than significant games. If they're able to hold off and get the second win of the night, it's not going to much matter going forward. All right, before we continue here, the Voice of College Football, and take your calls, I am going to take some advice for myself, and we're going to step it up on the promotion. So here we go. College football is even more exciting with some action on the line, and the games are even better when you're cashing in. And the Voice of College Football is the place to be to get the greatest value. Let's start with my picks. 75% against the money line, 58% against the spread. I've got a 40-year track record. In fact, in 2023, at $100 played per game, you would have netted over $9,300. And guess what? I'm just the warm-up act. Steve Merrill, our ace in the hole, show stopper from Wager Talk. 6 years with the Voice of College Football, over 30 years in the industry. Steve gives us analysis on all the big games, but you can't miss Steve's weekly under-the-radar pick, which went 21-5 against the spread the last two seasons. I repeat, 21-5 against the spread. You also get picks from some of our top analysts here at the Voice of College Football, including Steve Dace and Matt Zemek. Become a YouTube channel member or Patreon member for just $99 per month. Go to the main channel on YouTube, click join, and select the betting tier. Do the same thing on Patreon. Make 2024 a winner now. All right, folks, before we get to your calls, let's do what we do on these post-game shows and get you caught up on the scores. So the aforementioned game between Wisconsin and Western Michigan didn't take Wisconsin long to come back with a touchdown drive, apparently. I don't know what happened there, but they scored rather quickly because there was 13 minutes left in the fourth quarter, and they were down 14-13. But so they went for the 2-point conversion after scoring the touchdown, and Wisconsin leads 21-14. Western Michigan just took over possession, 10 minutes left in the game. Stanford is a 9-point dog at home against TCU. They scored a touchdown, make it 14-7. And the Cardinal, I saw the first drive. Ashton Daniels converted a 3rd and 19, and Stanford actually converted 3 3rd and 18, 19, 20s, but those were credited to TCU. So don't think that the Stanford offense has suddenly become what it was under Christian McCaffrey and Kevin Hogan and those guys. They were just the beneficiary of penalties, but Stanford does score the touchdown, and then they got a fumble recovery by a defensive back off a fumble by the wide receiver after a pass completion by Josh Hoover. They took it in for the touchdown. So the Cardinals showing a little bit of life in front of no one in Palo Alto, 14-7 over TCU. That would be a minor upset. Oklahoma, we forgot to mention the Sooners, but what's to mention? They led this thing 34-0 at half. The one notable here is, of course, Jackson Arnold. 4 touchdown passes. He threw for $141. He threw 3 of those touchdown passes at least to Deion Burks, the Purdue transfer, one of the best wide receivers in the Big Ten. And so he's got a great debut for Oklahoma tonight in defeating Temple 51-3. So the Sooners cover a 42-point spread. Army beats Lehigh 42-7. As mentioned, Michigan State struggles against FAU 16-10 in that game. Ugly game for Jonathan Smith in his debut, the only other game of the night. Duke better than Elon 26-3. All right, I'm sure you guys care about Elon and Duke tremendously. Let's get to the calls. We've got Hunter on the line.
How's it going, Mark?
It's going pretty well. How are you?
I'm doing a little scouting, watching the Wisconsin game.
Okay.
Um, yeah, Wisconsin doesn't look, I think they're just first game. They don't look, too bad. But what would you assess the level of competition of Western Michigan? I mean, I know they're, not a major group of five school, but they've been in some years where they've been competitive against some bigger Division One schools.
Well, about 10 years ago, PJ Fleck was there, and that's, of course, the most success they've ever had. They were the worst school in the MAC when he took over, and he lifted them up to a Cotton Bowl game. That's still kind of ridiculous to think about Western Michigan playing in the Cotton Bowl. They went 13-0 before they lost to Wisconsin that year. Ironically, they lost to Wisconsin in the Cotton Bowl by just one score. And then, of course, that set him up for the Minnesota job. Tim Lester did a decent job, nothing close to PJ Fleck, but a decent job at Western Michigan. He was there about, he was 37-32. So that's what, about 5 or 6 years at Western Michigan. They are going to win between 5 and 7 games this year, most likely. Yeah, they're not a great football team, but Wisconsin's struggling. And so that's what that is. And I don't think that we should go crazy or think that Wisconsin's the worst team in the world, but they should, on most nights, beat Western Michigan by, the spread's, I believe, 23. So they're losing a game in the fourth quarter to Western Michigan. So not a good performance by Wisconsin.
Yeah, and I like Wisconsin's head coach. I think he did a good job at his at Cincinnati, and it's his first year, so it'll give him a little bit. But I thought that Wisconsin would be a little bit better than this. Um, you know, um, I kind of want them to do very well because I want it to look good on Alabama's resume when we have to go and play them in a few
Yeah.
weeks.
Well, again, let's not overreact too much, but we got to talk about what we see on the field, and it's not impressive.
Yeah, this TCU and Stanford game is looking pretty competitive.
Yeah, well, depending on how long we're going to sit here and talk tonight, I may catch a good fourth quarter here. Hopefully, we'll see. Yeah,
You said earlier in your opening, when you were starting the show, that you're really looking forward to the A&M game tomorrow.
yes.
You think that's the marquee game of the day?
Well, if Clemson pulls off an upset, then that becomes the marquee game of the day. I don't give Clemson a huge chance in this game. I think Notre Dame and Texas A&M. I think Notre Dame has more on the line than any team playing tomorrow or this weekend.
Right. And I think I said this the other day when I called in. I I think Georgia will win this game. But I don't think Clemson is as bad as everybody's making them out to be.
Oh, people are going overboard because when you set a standard to the degree that they did for all those years, and then you become a 4-loss team, then it looks bad. It looks bad.
It does. But I think they can be competitive in this game. It's going to be one of the games that I'm looking forward to seeing, and just to see what Clemson can do against a team like Georgia. I've seen some people saying that they think that Georgia's going to do the same thing that they did to Oregon a few years ago in the season opener. I don't think that's going to be the case, but I think, you know, around 14 points what the line is right now, I think that's about where this game will end up.
I sure hope it's not anything close to what it was against Oregon. Boy, that was pretty amazing to consider. As good as Oregon was that year, that Georgia was just that incredibly dominant to be able to just dismantle them
Is
completely.
that the same year that they beat Ohio State?
No, that was the year before.
Okay,
That was
okay,
their first national championship season.
okay, okay. I remember I was at a wedding and I
Oh,
wasn't
no,
able
no,
to.
no, no, no. I'm sorry. You're right. It is. It is 2021, Georgia's first national championship season. They beat Clemson. That was their big non-conference game. They beat Clemson 10-3. Nobody scored an offensive touchdown. Georgia scored on a pick six. That was, yeah, Bo Nix's first game at Oregon. He played 2 seasons at Oregon, so that was the first game of 2022. So yes, that is the year that Georgia beat Ohio State in the playoffs.
You mean Oregon?
No, Georgia beat
No, no,
Ohio
no. I
State
was
in the
saying
playoffs.
no. I was saying was that the year that Oregon
Yes,
beat? Yeah. Okay.
that's the year Georgia beat Oregon in the first game, 2022. Yep.
No. I was saying is that the same year that Oregon beat Ohio State?
Oh, no.
What year was that? Would they beat
The year
them
before.
the year
Oregon
before?
beat Ohio State in 20. No, Oregon beat Ohio State in 20. Hang on just a second. Oregon beat Ohio State in 2021. Yes,
Okay.
2021.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I thought it was okay. I got my seasons mixed up. I thought it was 22 that they beat them. But I remember I was at a wedding that day, and I remember just seeing the score, and I wasn't able to watch the game. But I remember seeing that. But yeah, there's a lot of exciting games tomorrow. Why do you say you're looking forward to that game, the A&M game and Notre Dame game the most? Is it just because of Notre Dame has so much on the line? You think?
Yeah, that's part of it. And I also just think that there are other opportunities for all these other teams that if Notre Dame loses that game, I think it's the most damaging loss for anybody playing. Uh, and I don't know that Texas A&M is going to have such an outstanding dominant season to justify the loss for Notre Dame. And yeah, that's pretty much it. If this was another season in which Clemson was expected to be more competitive against Georgia, then that would be the game. If we were sitting here 5 years ago, then I'd say Clemson and Georgia. But I'm going to take Texas A&M and Notre Dame as the game that if I could only watch one game the entire weekend, I'd watch that game.
Right, right. And Alabama plays Western Kentucky tomorrow, and that's not a big matchup by any means. But I think it's interesting just to see what the identity of this Alabama team's going to be. With having Kalen DeBoer now as the head coach, and seeing what that defense is going to look like. With a different scheme than what we're used to seeing. Um, so what would you if you were a big Alabama fan? What would you be looking for in this game? Kind of the same things along the same lines that I just said.
Well, Justice Haynes is taking over as the number one running back. Um, he was to a certain extent last year, but he could become the one of the dominant running backs in college football this year. Of course, if they blow out Western Kentucky, it's not like they're going to feed him the ball 25 times. But, this Alabama wide receiver core has not been dominant the last couple of years. I know Kobe Prentice is certainly a guy that is probably the number one guy right now. But Ryan Williams, the stud uh, true freshman, has been getting all sorts of rave reviews in camp. So he may be a guy to look out for. And our buddy Stephen M. Smith, who drops by all the time, he, of course, loves to sort out the offensive line. And there's a few spots up front that are being worked on. So, yeah, if there was one player that I would want to see more than anyone, it's this Ryan Williams at wide receiver.
Yeah, and I think another guy that can have a big, and I heard the coaching staff talk about in interviews, and his name's been brought up in relation to that wide receiver room, is Emmanuel Henderson.
Yep.
He's from my hometown, and I watched this kid play high school ball, and really fast, and I just didn't know with him, switching to wide receiver, because he played running back in high school, how he would be, and I knew it would take him some development, but it seems like he's getting a grasp of the position and really stepping into it. So that'll be cool to see. And it's going to be very weird seeing Nick Saban on the sidelines. It hasn't really hit home for me yet. So I think it will. Tomorrow when you don't see him, you know, um, you know, on there. So it's a it's a it's a. I'm glad that Saban retired when he did, because of the fact that, if not saying that the program would have declined under him, I don't think that would have happened at all. But if his heart's not in it, anymore, then, um, it's better for him to step away and let somebody take over when, you have such an elite roster. Um, and I'm happy that he's able to spend time with his family and his grandkids. I mean, the man deserves that. And some Alabama fans, don't like the fact that he just, you know, retired, but, um, you got to give, he deserves, to have
Sure.
time with his family and to live out the rest of his, life,
Let the man do what he wants. He's 72 years old.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Is there any, who's been the, how old is Mac Brown? He's got to be
Somewhere
up
in that
there.
range.
He's got to be up there. And I think I just read where he signed an extension till 2028. So, he'll, if he stays out that whole contract, he'll be up there. But anyway, I'll let you get to more callers. But looking forward to tomorrow and just glad the football's back.
Mac Brown just turned 73 years old. What is the date today? Today's the what? Like the 28th, 29th? He just turned 73 a couple days ago.
Wow, yeah, he'd be really up there if he, you goes up there and sticks through that whole contract extension. But anyway, well, thank you, Mark, and we'll talk to you later.
Thanks, Hunter. Appreciate it. Have a good night.
You too. Bye bye.
All right, Friday night here at the Voice of College Football. This is what we do the entire season as we break down post game. And of course, if I could operate on like zero sleep, and if people would show up later, I would actually watch all the games. I'd watch all the games, and then when the last game went to double zeros, unless it was 42-7 in the fourth quarter, I would go live then. Like I would be watching Stanford and TCU right now, and then we would go live. But we're not doing a live show until 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, or starting at the game didn't kick off, I don't think, until 10:30. And knowing just kind of how those two teams play, and I could just see it going off into what? Let's see, 1:30, probably 2 o'clock, 2:15 by the time the game's over. Yeah, can't do that anymore. That does hurt me on Saturday nights because I do like those West Coast games, which is going to be a bit interesting to see how that is scheduled from week to week, because the early games that were scheduled during the off season had to do with the marquee matchups. The networks made their bids and scheduled and nailed down those high end games. But in terms of the late night games and the other broadcast windows, those get determined the Monday, not before the games are played, but the previous Monday. So about 12 days before the games. And we'll see how those late night windows fill up and what kind of games we have now that we don't have a Pac-12, but we still have all the schools involved on the West Coast, and see when they play. But I do miss watching those games late night. And even though my intent was to watch as much football tonight as I possibly could, which I did, I had all the games on. Just running the voice of college football always requires so many things, so many emails, so many this, so many that it was difficult to focus on these games. But did my best late in the game with Michigan State holding on for dear life. And then this Wisconsin situation intrigues me against Western Michigan, but it appears as though they have taken care of business as they got the ball back, drove down the field, just scored. So we're inside 2 minutes now, and Western Michigan really needs to get things going here with a 2-touchdown deficit. Although they do have a 2nd and 20, they did move it to midfield. Stanford putting up a fight against TCU. We're almost to halftime, and TCU's got the ball at the 50, trying to score and even the score with Stanford. So, hey, Stanford, as a fairly substantial underdog, may get to the break with a lead. Again, Oklahoma wins 51-3 over Temple. Oklahoma's got an extremely difficult conference schedule, but they scheduled no one outside the conference. They've got 3 gimme wins. They do have Tulane, so we'll give Oklahoma that. And Tulane scared them a couple of years ago in what I believe was Lincoln Riley's final season, correct? Final season? No, maybe it was the year before, either 2021 or 22. I don't think it was the really good Tulane team. It was the year before when they were still 2-10, but they scared Oklahoma in Norman, and the Sooners have to play Tulane coming up in a couple of weeks. So that could be a bit of a threat. They certainly had none tonight against Stan Drayton's Fighting Owls of Temple. Just an awful, awful football program right now. And again, when you combine the efforts of Wisconsin, who at least is taking the game at hand, down 14-13 in the fourth quarter, they woke up and they took charge. So that shows us something there. When a team is down by a point and they're not playing well and they're playing an inferior opponent, sure, they should not be in that situation in the fourth quarter. But when faced with that situation, for them to get 2 stops and to drive for 2 touchdowns on consecutive drives shows that Wisconsin was able to pull it together when they needed to. So now we're at 2 minutes left on the clock, and Western Michigan, with its last gasp, they are somewhere close to midfield against Wisconsin. And again, Michigan State was ugly on offense. They did next to nothing on offense. They may have thrown for about 120 yards. Let's check that out. Aiden Childs, who of course played under Jonathan Smith at Oregon State, even though he was the backup quarterback, he would come in, they would run some packages with him to take advantage of his running ability. Threw 5 touchdowns last year with no picks, but he did not look that great tonight. 10 of 24 for $114. He threw 2 interceptions. One of those was in the red zone when they were about to score a touchdown. K'Ron Lynch-Adams had the big night for Michigan State on the ground, even though they gave the ball 10 more times to Nate Carter, but he could only get a 12-yard run, was his longest run. So if you look at Lynch-Adams' I saw the 63-yard touchdown. This guy runs, it's interesting. He's got a white face mask. He looks like he belongs in the 1960s. It reminded me of Joe Washington for some reason. Maybe because Joe Washington would wear glasses. So he had a rather distinct look as a running back in college in the NFL. But Lynch Adams had the 63-yard run, which was pretty impressive. It was blocked to a T. You could have driven a Mack truck through the hole, and then the safeties couldn't catch him. So it was a beautifully designed, beautifully executed play more than anything. And he showed a burst that was certainly too much for the FAU secondary. But if you take that run away, which of course you can't, that's part of the deal, but 8 carries, 37 yards. And then the other guy, Nate Carter, gets 19 carries for 48 yards. So they didn't even really run it consistently, and they couldn't throw it. 2 picks, 10 for 24, a buck 14. So really an ugly offensive effort by the Michigan State Spartans. They held FAU down to 10 points, but that's probably not any kind of a great feat either. All right, taking calls here at the Voice of College Football. We got the real MVP on the line.
Hey, Mark, how you doing this evening?
I am doing just fine. What's going on with you?
I'm watching the SEC become the best conference by absolutely doing nothing. Mark, how about you?
I would probably share in that assessment because the Big Ten has looked rather mundane, to be kind. Minnesota played a okay North Carolina team, but they looked really bad on offense. And we heard your take and others about PJ Fleck and his program kind of grinding to a halt. At least that's what appears to be the case. And then we see Michigan State against FAU. Seriously, at home, if that game's played somewhere else, maybe they lose that game. And if FAU was capable in any way, they would have, on a number of occasions, based on what I saw, would have taken advantage and been able to. Any team out there with a pulse, probably 25 group of 5 teams would have won that game against Michigan State tonight. And then we see Wisconsin finally wake up halfway through the fourth quarter against Western Michigan, who's been a 5 or 6 win team most of the time. Bad. Yeah, you're right. The SEC's done nothing but sit around and become even more substantially the best conference.
Right. I'm not sure. You haven't watched the game, but the spark was after a punt by Wisconsin. The ball perfectly bounced if you're Wisconsin into a Western Michigan player, creating a muff punt situation, and Wisconsin fell on it and got 50 yards out of it.
Yeah, that helps.
Yeah, so it's not like Wisconsin drove it down the length of the field. Now, actually, I think they went 3 and out that drive before the muff punt incident. Tyler Van Dyke looks like complete garbage, Mark. Why shouldn't anyone believe in his ability at all to do anything of any note during this Big Ten season?
Tyler Van Dyke looks like a guy who has the appearance of an NFL quarterback. Like he has the stature, he's got the shoulders, and then when you see him throw the ball, like if we would go out to warm-ups, he looks like an NFL quarterback throwing the ball. He makes horrendous decisions, and he's not that accurate. That's a bad combination. Make bad decisions, and then you're not accurate enough to pull it off. And so, like, for example, he threw a ball from the right hash mark all the way across the field and completed it. And the analyst that was doing the game with Tim Brando was just amazed at this throw and bragged about it forever. And I thought, well, that's a Western Michigan cornerback. When he's doing that 3 weeks from now or 1 week from now against Alabama, I think that game's next week, maybe the week after. I don't think we'll be raving about that decision because it was a stupid decision that he's not going to be able to do against half the cornerbacks or maybe all the cornerbacks he faces in the Big Ten. Certainly none that play for Alabama.
Right, and I'm not sure. I don't remember having him this tendency in Miami, but he holds on the ball for way, way, way too long, Mark.
Yes, he does that too. Yes. Yep.
It cost them a fumble in this game, which led. I believe that was the fumble that led to the fake field goal, which led to the touchdown.
I saw that.
Michigan State, Mark, is just a terrible team. They're on the Colorado plan for offensive defensive line. So if you know any EMTs or medical professionals that could go out to East Lansing and resuscitate the offensive and defensive line, I think they would appreciate it.
And they don't have any Travis Hunters or Shadur Sanders standing around.
I'll give the quarterback some credit. You could tell he's athletic and he's mobile and can move around. He just didn't have any time to create plays or do anything.
It was a talented guy. Yeah, they might be able to do something with him.
Yeah, I believe in him. I just don't believe in the entire rest of the team. They're complete garbage. I mean, I know it was only 13.5 point spread for Michigan State, but truth be told, if FAU played halfway decent football, they'd probably win that game fairly comfortably.
Sure. That's why I say there's probably 25 group of 5 teams out there that would have won this game. And when we get these games early in the season and these announced teams that we get during these games, let's see, I think this was on the Big Ten Network, I believe. I don't know who the analyst was doing this game, but there was a sequence in which he said that Michigan State was definitely going to be in a bowl game this year. And I thought, really? Okay, that's fine if you're going to guarantee that. But then he said a couple seconds, like 2 sentences later, that they would have to dominate this game to make a bowl game, which I was thinking, are you making some kind of declarative statement that you're determining how good they're going to be for the rest of the season based on this game? Because it certainly has nothing to do with making a bowl game other than just getting one more point than the other team to get the win. It was just I heard a lot of, I think these guys sometimes just talk because they don't know what else to say. Yeah, Michigan State, I think, Mel Tucker left them in a bad place. And Jonathan Smith's a really good coach, but he's going to get kicked in the teeth for a couple of years before he possibly builds this thing back up.
Right, and I want to make the dynamics between Luke Fickell and Jonathan Smith. I believe in Jonathan Smith. He's done it at Oregon State. Luke Fickell's only done it at Cincinnati. Now, he hit the highest of highs at Cincinnati, but I was expecting more out of this Wisconsin team this year. And it looks like they're a 6-6, 7-5 football team, Mark. Would that be a disappointing year for Wisconsin?
So last year, 7-6, that was a disappointment for Wisconsin. Not that anyone expected them to be substantially better than that, but I'll give them a little bit of a break in that they came within one play of beating LSU in the bowl game, and 8-5 looks much better than 7-6. But from a win standpoint, it was a disappointment last year. The new offense did not work. It didn't look good. It looked like they were forcing something upon a roster that's not capable of doing what they're trying to do. Then we see this transfer of Tyler Van Dyke, who he just gave us more confirmation tonight that he's not a very good quarterback, and he just caught the ACC off guard for 7 or 8 games 3 years ago, but he was terrible the last 2 years. And I don't know if places like Minnesota and Wisconsin just can't get a capable quarterback. So if they get somebody that has some kind of reputation that they just grasp for that guy, because Luke Fickell knows football. I just can't believe that they would think that they're going to go anywhere with him. And then on top of that, if they're going to look this bad tonight, they've got a tough schedule. They do not have a forgiving schedule. They've got Penn State, Oregon, USC, Iowa, Alabama, Nebraska. And maybe some teams I'm missing. they could, if they play like this and don't improve much in this, and they are looking at Tyler Van Dyke maybe throwing 15 interceptions this year, 7-5 might be generous.
See, I'm willing to give the newer and inexperienced quarterback like Michigan State's quarterback the benefit of the doubt because I think he'll improve and progress.
Yep.
But I just can't give Florida State's quarterback and Wisconsin's quarterback that same benefit of the doubt because they've had 3 years to do it and they just look the exact same.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to liken it to Brett Favre in this way. Not that I'm comparing those two guys to one of the greatest quarterbacks in the history of the NFL, but we all know that Brett Favre also threw more interceptions than anybody in the history of the NFL. And I would watch him during the latter portion of his career and think, has he not learned anything? Now, Brett Favre was so incredibly talented that he could get away with a lot of that. So it's not a fair comparison, but still, I don't think he ever truly learned the position and how to make decisions as well as he should have after playing a million years. And I don't know if these guys just don't have the wherewithal to, they're just big guys talking about DJ and TVD. They are guys that have the body type to play major college football. Even in the NFL, they have the body frame and the strength and the arm talent, not the arm talent, the arm strength to play at the next level, but they don't have anything else. They don't have the arm talent, meaning trajectory, when to take something off the football, where to place it. When they throw, they have the capability to throw amazing shots downfield, but you've got to withstand the 12 or 15 misfires a game, and then you're going to see something amazing every 3 drives out of them, but that doesn't make up for the turnovers and the misfires, and neither one of them seem to be able to read what's going on downfield.
I agree with that assessment completely, Mark. Some unfortunate news out of Chapel Hill today. Max Johnson is going to miss the remainder of the season. How does this change the trajectory of North Carolina football?
Well, I got to think that they have really probably assessed their playbook today and thought, okay, well, what are we going to do that is going to accentuate what Connor Harrell does well? Based on what we saw, which was a very limited sample size last night, I'm going to liken him to a guy, and I might butcher his name because he was the backup quarterback at Penn State about 5 years ago, maybe not even that long ago. Tyquan Roberson, I believe, was his last name. And Penn State played a game on the road at Iowa. Sean Clifford got knocked out of the game. And this guy comes into the game, and he had no idea what he was doing. He was just basically a running back playing quarterback. And you had this thought that, well, he's the backup quarterback at Penn State. He can't be this bad. He'll get better. No, he never got better. And then he was like the starting quarterback at UConn, completing 40% of his passes the next year. This is what I see when I see Connor Harrell. But again, very limited sample size. Maybe they can work with him. Maybe he can do something. And they said last night that he actually pushed, because of his athleticism, pushed Max Johnson for the starting job. So they thought about him being the starter anyway. But of course, they're going to take advantage of his running skills. And if he has a future, this may, aside from Max Johnson's situation, be a blessing in disguise for North Carolina football for next year, if they can work with him and let him play out the season, and then he's a better player next year.
Right. I want to mention one tomorrow game. Everybody I'm seeing is picking Notre Dame to beat Texas A&M.
Yeah.
But yeah, Texas A&M is favored, and the line just keeps getting bigger. Why is that? Why is Texas A&M favored?
So I have thought this entire offseason that Notre Dame would win this game. Not that it was going to be easy, not that it was going to be a cinch or anything like that. I just thought, I don't think anything's going to happen that's going to cause me to deviate from this idea that, okay, Mike Elko, it's his first game. That's a difficult situation for a first-year head coach, even though I think he's a great coach, and I think he was the best hire in the country. I wanted to give him some time to break in, and a first game is always difficult for a first-time head coach, or first-year head coach, I should say, versus what should be the situation with Marcus Freeman in his third season. He should be rounding into form. He should not be making the mistakes that he's made in previous years. Notre Dame is supposed to have one of the best defenses in the country. Riley Leonard is he's a playmaker. He's not going to be a great NFL quarterback, but he's a playmaker. So I thought that there were reasons why, and I just think Texas A&M is going to continue to be what we've seen under Jimbo Fisher, even though I think Mike Elko is going to do really good things there, where they've got talent because they've recruited so well, but that talent's on defense. It's running backs and it's defensive linemen and linebackers, but it's not wide receivers. I just don't expect them to have a very dynamic offense this year. And so I thought Notre Dame would win a rock fight. But the more, after talking to our buddy Brian Driscoll the other night and doing our Notre Dame show, since they lost this left tackle, who was their best offensive lineman, and I actually think Connor Weigman might be just as good as Riley Leonard. I actually do think he is. I just think he's less experienced. And Texas A&M's a difficult place to play. I'm starting to lean in that direction. I may just make a prediction on principle because I've just thought the entire offseason, Notre Dame's going to win this game. I've got Notre Dame in the playoff. Therefore, I've got to pick them, while my instincts are starting to tell me that Texas A&M is going to win this game.
If Notre Dame wins this game, does this count as a big game that they've won?
No.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Unless Texas A&M shows us something that we're not expecting. But I think Texas A&M is going to go 8-4. I think they're of course, I don't need to explain. You know what Texas A&M is.
Yeah, historically disappointing.
Yeah, they're historically disappointing. They've got a bunch of athletes and they recruit well, but they're nothing special. And they're a mid-level SEC team.
Right. Final thing I'll say, Mark, is one massive upset I've got my eyes on, since nobody's talking about this game, and we always have one of those games. South Dakota State over New Mexico, or Oklahoma State, sorry.
Yes. Oklahoma State had one of these last year against South Alabama, where they got completely drubbed at home. I think Oklahoma State might be a little fool's gold for some people, just because we tend to look at a couple star players and think, okay, they're good, they're back. So they've got Ali Gordon back at running back, and their quarterback Alan Bowman's back, but he's not very good. Yeah, I think that could be interesting. Yes, I like where you're going there.
Appreciate it, Mark. I'll be looking forward to watching Georgia win by 45 tomorrow.
I don't know how Clemson's going to score tomorrow. So that's the conventional thinking. I try to stay ahead of the curve if I can. Like, if I attempt, just like with my season predictions, I attempt to look at what is the obvious narrative to everyone and try to find a path. Like with Georgia Tech. If you watch the video that I posted before Florida State, Georgia Tech, that is an example of me saying, and I'm looking at scores coming in from people that work in the media and football guys, and then also from fans that are basically saying this is a non-game, this is a blowout. And I found a path for Georgia Tech, and all the bullet points came true. If only I could be Nostradamus all the time. That's not going to happen too often, because I just hit every point, and I saw that Georgia Tech could win that game. So I try to be ahead of the curve. But with this Georgia-Clemson game, I think that what is obvious to everyone is just obvious to everyone. How is Clemson going to score in this game? Of course, I expect them to score, to put up points, but I mean substantially score. This Saturday is awfully important for Dabo Swinney. It's awfully important for Mario Cristobal, even though Miami, technically, it's not an extremely important game for Miami because nobody's expecting them to go on a run like they're Georgia or Ohio State and go 12-0 or something. I've seen some 11-1. I guess there's a few 11-1 predictions out there for Miami because they can go hide in the ACC and possibly if they get things together, and this is the year that they break through, that they can run roughshod over the ACC. But I still think that it's an important game for Mario Cristobal to show us that he can coach against a quality opponent, not a great team by any stretch, but a decent opponent, and actually go in there and win a game on the road. He hasn't done that in his first two seasons. He has not gone anywhere and won against a decent opponent. Again, this is not a great team that he's playing. It's the 10th best team in the SEC, something in that range. But he's not done that his first year. He did beat Clemson last year. That was at home. They did beat Texas A&M last year. What is rather amusing about Miami's season last year and going 7-6 is that if you would have said at the beginning of the year, they're going to beat Texas A&M and Clemson, those were the only two games on the schedule that they were an underdog. Okay, Florida State. Florida State was a game where they were an underdog, and they did lose that, but they were competitive. It was a decent game. They didn't have their quarterback. But they beat Clemson and Texas A&M, and they still found a way to lose 6 games. Yeah, this Miami-Florida game just astounds me where we stand in college football with these schedules. I think these teams are rather close. They are very close, and the game's being played at Florida. And Miami's the 3-point favorite. But the view that we all have on Miami this season versus the optimism or lack thereof for Florida, completely different scenarios. But we're not playing scenarios on Saturday. The two teams are just going to play a game. And Florida may win that game and then proceed to go 5-7. Miami may lose that game and proceed to go 10-1, 10-2. I haven't, my picks will be out either late tonight or first thing in the morning. Better do them late tonight. But we released Steve Dace's picks. We give him a 12-pack each week, or he's basically gives us a 12-pack. I send him the 12 games I would like him to predict. He sends it back, as does our buddy Matt Zemek on the USC channel. And so we release those on the community page. Now, those aren't always going to be freebies, folks, because we've got a betting tier, VOCFB betting tier on Patreon and here at YouTube. And you'll get my picks and Steve's and Matt's, and then you get Steve Merrill's Under the Radar selection, which he delivered, and that's a freebie this week as well. Check that out. 21-5 against the spread the last 2 years for Steve Merrill in his Under the Radar selection against the spread. 21-5. Okay. Yeah, it's a great triple header on ABC. The most likely dog is, of course, the Dogs and the Tigers. They're playing they're not playing in Charlotte. They're playing in Atlanta. Correct? I would love to see Clemson stay in that game. I would love to see a decent game. But it's tough to envision. It's tough to envision Cade Klubnik. I have not seen him play a decent game against a good opponent. It's not happened. So, boy, he better have improved. Our guy, Jason Priester, with Clemson Insider, told us the other day that by all accounts, he has not improved, that he's the same quarterback. So Garrett Riley is staying up overnight, not getting sleep this week, probably hasn't gotten sleep for the last month, trying to figure out what to do with Cade Klubnik and how to block that Georgia front seven. The spread's about 13.5 to 14. That could be a very key number there, between 13.5 and 14, with Georgia possibly hitting that 14. That's, I believe, the third most key number in the football betting world. The first one is 3. So if you're feeling good about a game, and let's say you're feeling good about an underdog, and that spread goes either from 2.5 to 3 or from 3 to 3.5, that is the number that changes more outcomes against the spread than any other number. 3. And then the next one's, of course, 7. And then the next one, I believe, is 14. 10's another one. 14's another one, for obvious reasons, because we got a lot of 7s and 3s on the board. But with the 2-point conversion being as prevalent as it is now, and of course, there was not a 2-point conversion in the NFL until, about 10 years ago. I would think that the propensity of those numbers coming up has dropped considerably in the NFL since the 2-point conversion, but it's still the number that comes up the most. Adam believes Georgia's going to win 30-10. Uncle Rico, big year for Cade. Yeah, Clemson has become the school where elite quarterback prospects go to die. DJ, even Hunter Johnson, and now Cade Klubnik, probably. Although it's just one season for him. Only one season. Cade Klubnik and Drew Aller are the guys that are under the gun this year after having just one season. Now, Cade Klubnik did throw 9 interceptions, and Drew Aller threw 2 last year against probably a better schedule. Cade Klubnik had to face Notre Dame, Florida State, NC State, Louisville. Drew Aller faced Ohio State, Michigan, Maryland, Iowa, Ole Miss in the bowl game. The outcome in Iowa City on Saturday is probably not going to be in doubt because Iowa's defense is just way too good. Keep in mind that it was, 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, that they won their opener against an FCS team 7-3. And no, they didn't score a touchdown. They scored 2 safeties and a field goal and won 7-3. And I will never forget. Some things just stick in my mind in regards to oddities. Winning 7-3, not scoring a touchdown, but scoring 2 safeties by your defense. And then even the field goal drive was a negative yardage field goal drive. So the offense didn't drive it and kick a field goal. The offense got the ball, went minus yardage, and then kicked the field goal. So I bring that up to say it's not a big game for Iowa from a win-loss standpoint. You wouldn't think they're a 23-point favorite. But from the standpoint of Tim Lester, new offense, well, it's going to be the old Iowa offense, but he's going to put some window dressing on it. Had a stat that was confirmed that we talked about on the Iowa show this past week that Iowa apparently had less plays run with any kind of shifts or motion than any offense in the country last year. So they got the worst offense in the country, but they don't try to fool the defense at all. And you're not fooling the defense with shifts and motion. It's not like you're just completely fooling them. They have no idea what's coming. But you shift their eyes around. These plays last like 4 to 7 seconds. If you can get a defender or 2 or 5 on their heels or looking the wrong way, you snap the ball. You get the angle. You get just enough that could be the difference between a 0 yardage play and a 3-yard gain, or a 3-yard gain and a 7-yard gain. Or somebody busts it to the house. And Tim Lester made the comment several times this summer that he's simply going to go from taking this offense and we're going to try to give the defense different looks. We may run the same plays, but we'll give the defense many different looks to get them on their heels. That's part of the strategy of any offense. Not just that the play is going to be something that they've never seen before. That's not going to happen. But it's about disguising the play or giving them, you hear the term, put the defenders in conflict. Put the defensive end in conflict because you get a mobile quarterback and you run the read option and he doesn't know what to do. Or you just, again, put them in stress. It's a very simple thing for an offensive coordinator in this day and age to be able to take a playbook and say, we're going to run all the same plays. However, we're going to set up the defense by, first of all, the way we run the plays. We can use the same playbook, but we can actually set up things for later in the game by the way we call the game in the first quarter, number one. Number two, again, using this motion to get the players on defense to be uncertain of their responsibilities and what's going to happen. One of the simplest things that you see all the time is just running a dude in motion. What does that do? Does a lot of things. Number one, it sometimes gives away the coverage, gives away the defensive scheme by just running a guy in motion. You see whether there's going to be somebody that's going to trail him or what's going to happen. So you open up the coverage possibilities. You also, how many times do you see a guy run in motion and by simply running in motion, he gets a couple steps on the guy that has to run across the formation and you just throw him the ball. Some things in sports never change and they're difficult to defend and guys can study and they just become difficult to defend. The pick and roll. Any type of crossing routes with receivers, you put the DBs in a difficult situation trying to stay on their man when they cross with another guy, especially when you create contact that's illegal, but it's done all the time. That's all Iowa needs to do to become a better offense, even if all the players are the same and they run the same plays. So we'll see if Iowa can be a little bit better offense this year. Ralph is pegging a game that I also mentioned when we went through the entire Saturday schedule. Miami of Ohio is only a 3-point underdog, so that wouldn't be much of an upset. But in terms of Power 5, Group of 5, you're talking about possibly the MAC. They were the MAC champions last year against a Northwestern team that, of course, was remarkable in going 8-5 last year. Keep chopping. Mrs. Deacon Hill. Okay, let's run through the schedule. And I'm going to tell you what I'm going to watch. And again, you will get my predictions here very soon. And I hate how this defaults to the top 25 because I'm a college football guy through and through that likes all the games. So let's get to the games. We've got Stanford leading TCU 17-13. And they are not even halfway through the third quarter. Okay, here we go. And my strategy for Saturdays is going to be what it was last year because it worked out well and you guys seem to enjoy watching this, or somebody did. Maybe not you guys, maybe a completely different set of folks, but they did rather well. Is what I decided to do. And again, the response was pretty good, was watch 2 games at noon. I can't watch 3. Watch 2 games at noon, pick out the 2 best games, watch them. As soon as they're over, instant analysis is coming your way. Then I go back and I start watching the 3:30 games and I rewind to the start and catch up with the live action. Do the same thing after the 3:30 games. So roughly at 7:30, boom, 2 more instant analysis videos come out. And then I watch the primetime games. And in the past, I've gone straight to this seat to do the call-in show, the post-game show, and after the primetime games. However, last year, I determined, hey, people are watching these instant analysis videos, so we're going to do 2 for primetime. Then I'll be on to do the post-game show. So here we go. At noon, I'm going to watch these 2 games, Clemson, Georgia, and Penn State, West Virginia. Now, if one of these 2 games, and I see that Georgia line has dropped to 12, and I see the Penn State game has dropped to 7.5. Penn State was a 9 to 9.5 point favorite earlier this week. Georgia was at 14. Okay, I'm going to watch those 2 games. And if one of those gets out of hand, the next game I would go to would be, I guess, the Iowa game against Illinois State. I guess that one. Okay, then at 3:30. My goodness. Something in me has to watch Ohio State and Akron, has to at least have that game on, but I want to watch Florida, Miami. Of course, that's going to be the game I'm going to watch first and foremost. Miami and Florida. And then my second screen is going to be on North Dakota, may give Iowa State a game. My second screen, okay, there aren't any other decent 3:30 games. The 3:30 window is atrocious. So again, it's all about Miami and Florida. What I'm going to do is, because they're the best team playing, is start out by watching Ohio State and Akron. And if it's 28-0 in the first quarter, then I'm going to switch to whatever the second best game is from a competitive standpoint. Maybe I'll check out Dylan Raiola against UTEP in his debut for the Huskers. And then, as Ralph pointed out, Miami Northwestern on BTN could be an upset. Again, it's not going to be much of an upset because Northwestern's only a 3.5 point favorite. Okay, then in prime time, of course, Notre Dame, Texas A&M, that's first and foremost. After that, I guess my second screen, it looks to be Michigan, Fresno State. And then if that turns into a blowout, then we will go to probably the Alabama game against Western Kentucky, maybe UCLA as a 2-touchdown favorite, has trouble in Hawaii. That is certainly a possibility. But it's a slim, the 3 games on ABC and then the 1 game with Penn State and West Virginia, you take those games out and it's really a rough week. And look at that. The Big Ten Network folks are sure going to be glad that the conference expanded out to the West Coast, because they're going to be doing the Washington-Weber State game at 11 p.m. Eastern time. So that game's not going to be over until 2:30 in the morning, 2:45. And then they're going to do their post-game show, I guess. So they're going to be up later than us. All right, folks, that should wrap it up for a Friday night post-game show. We do appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. And again, keep in mind, on Saturday, we're going to do 2 instant analysis of the noon games, 2 from the 3:30 games, 2 from the primetime games, and then we're going to be right back here at about 11:30 Eastern time for the wrap-up call-in show. And on top of that, check out the team channels, because we've got Michigan postgame, Ohio State postgame, Iowa, Nebraska, Oregon, West Virginia postgame. We've got Alabama postgame, Clemson, Florida State. Well, they play Monday, Miami, and those are the postgame shows that we've got tomorrow. And Texas. We've got, I believe, 11 postgame shows on Saturday. So we appreciate you being here, the Voice of College Football. We will see you on Saturday, and have a great night. And if you can't get enough of college football, TCU and Stanford are playing a decent game, at least it's close. There we go. Uncle Rico's letting me know. TCU and Stanford. There we go. Yes. What about them? Yes. They both used to be good. That's what we know. All right. We will see you on Saturday night.